Hello everyone, back tuning into today's video. We're going to have a look at the weather for the next week to 10 days, or today's video. That will take us to around the 26th of January, so we're heading into the final stages of the month really with the week to 10 day video update time frame now. So we'll be able to extend out beyond the week to 10 day time frame for the extended GFS and ECMWF and have a look at Beijing Climate Centre at the end of the video for the next 40 days. That takes us well into February. So before we do anything else though, I've got to say a big thank you to our latest patron. So we currently have 66 patrons for Gaz Service. Hello, and a big thank you to our 66 patrons. We hope that you're enjoying the content that we're producing at Gaz Service at the moment. We have had a new patron. Now this patron would rather stay anonymous. That's absolutely fine. If anybody would like to sign up with Patreon, become a patron for Gaz Service, but they would rather not be mentioned in videos, and that's perfectly fine. There's no problem with that whatsoever. Just let us know when you become a patron, and we'll just say thank you very much to this anonymous person. So you know who you are, anonymous, and I just want to say big thank you to you for becoming a patron for Gaz Service. If you would like to become a patron for Gaz Service and help to support website Keep Content Online, all you need to do is come to Gaz Service Patreon page. You sign up for a Patreon account, assuming you don't already have one, making an ongoing monthly donation to Gaz Service. Can be anything from $1 a month upwards. You pool in with all of the other patrons, and that's how you're going to become a patron for Gaz Service. So big thank you to all of our patrons. Special thank you to Anonymous. There is also PayPal as well, so if you would like to give a donation however much you want through PayPal, then all you need to do is come to Gaz Service PayPal page. So with this, you just reach Gaz Service PayPal page, sign into your PayPal account, and then just donate whatever you would like. And again, you're going to get a mention in videos as long as you want one. Again, if you'd rather say anonymous, and leave a little note with your donation, and let us know you'd rather not have a mention. But otherwise, we'll give you a shout out and say thank you very much for becoming a donor, a PayPal donor for Gaz Service. So big thank you to all of our patrons. Big thank you to all of our donors. Special thank you to latest patron, Anonymous. Thank you so much, Anonymous, for doing that. Right, so we're going to start off with the Arctic Oscillation and North Atlantic Oscillation. Now, I was going to look at this yesterday, but the day got away with me, so I had to cut the video down yesterday and make it around 10 minutes. So, got a little bit more time to go over this today. So, this was from yesterday, actually, but I doubt when this updates later on this afternoon, whether things will look greatly different to what this is showing. Famous last words. So this is up to the 15th of January. The black line shows where we've been with the Arctic Oscillation. The red lines at the end show where the GFS ensembles are forecasting the Arctic Oscillation to go. So again, it's just an index that's reflecting the atmospheric state. It's not driving anything in its own terms. It just tells you what the atmosphere is doing. And when the Arctic Oscillation is positive, you've got low pressure up over the Arctic and over the North Pole. And that keeps the cold air, tends to keep it bottled in over the pole and the Arctic, really, which will this time of year tend to strengthen the zone of westerlies coming across the Atlantic. So a positive AO is kind of like a signal for zonality, particularly if it's combined with a positive NAO. More about that in a moment. Conversely, when the AO is negative, you'll have high pressure blocking over the pole, and that is route pushing cold air out of the pole and the Arctic and down into the mid-latitudes. Had a very prolonged positive spell, or very positive spell of the Arctic Oscillation over a relatively prolonged period. Started sort of late December into January, and that's where we currently are right now. Really positive with the AO. It is going to come down. The GFS ensembles have shown that the Arctic Oscillation is going to reduce just down to more sensibly positive levels. So it's going to stay positive over the next week. We're just going to move from this exceptionally positive phase of the AO that we're currently in into something a little bit more standard, really. Positivity, that kind of positivity that we see there, that's kind of like the normal sort of winter position with the AO. So on the, it is positive, but it's not exceptionally so. Not like we see up here, which is quite unusual to see the AO going that positive, and possibly is record breaking even. So in next week the AO will come down, but it's going to stay positive, and then the GFS ensembles in the extended range, generally forecasting it to stay positive as well, right way through to month's end. So it's kind of like the end of January, just here. One or two ensemble members go a little bit negative, but they're outliers. Most of these GFS ensemble members are keeping the AO positive, just less so than it has been through the first half of January. NAO is very similar. So again, black line shows where we've been with the North Atlantic Oscillation. Red lines have the M, where GFS ensembles are forecasting the North Atlantic Oscillation to go. Again, just an index that's reflecting the atmospheric state. This time, instead of looking at the Arctic, we're looking at the North Atlantic. When the NAO is positive, you've got low pressure over or around Iceland and over Greenland, and you'll have high pressure through the Azores. Conversely, when the NAO is negative, you'll tend to have higher pressure around Iceland and Greenland, and lower pressure through the Azores. So when we combine the AO with the NAO, if they are both positive, then that will tend to be a westerly zonal Atlantic driven and low pressure dominated signal, and in winter that will tend to be a mild signal. So the NAO has been in its positive phase all winter. It went through a very prolonged negative phase from last spring 2019, right the way through to November, just there. But then things sort of changed. It went a little bit positive with the NAO through the first half of November, fall back into negativity again. But around the first day of December, look at that, the NAO just takes off into positive territory. And it's been solidly positive with this NAO all winter. That's where we are right now. So we're up to the middle of January. We're still positive with the NAO. GFS ensembles are forecasting that we stay roughly where we are right now, which is neutral to positive. Again, it's not exceptionally so. It's not like what we've had with the AO, which has been exceptionally positive through the first half of January. This is just standard winter stuff, really, in solidly positive territory, but not exceptionally so. Few GFS ensemble members take the NAO slightly negative as we get through to the end of January. Again, they're pretty much outliers. Most of those ensemble members keep the NAO in positive territory. So, through the first half of January, of course, we have both of these indexes positive, but the AO have been exceptionally positive. Looks like the second half of January will take both of these indexes, or keep both these indexes positive, but it will take the NAO back closer to something a little bit more sensible. But essentially, this is still telling us that into the second half of January, we're likely to remain Atlantic dominated, at the very least, I think. This is how the century and temperature is looking. Of course, we're halfway through the month now, or just about halfway through the month. So CET currently is standing at 7.4. That's an anomaly of 3.9 degrees above average, nearly 4 degrees above average. That is provisional to yesterday, the 15th of January. This has stalled a little bit. Remember, the all-time CET record for January is 7.5, and that was set in the year of 1916. 1916 is the all-time warmest January on record for the CET, going right way back to 1659. It's one of the longest-standing monthly temperature records. So we are on the cusp here at the moment of beating the warmest January on record. But I think the chances of doing that are pretty much gone now. I'm going to show you the charts in a moment. Things will be cooling down over the next few days. We're going to start getting some frosty nights coming along. I think the second half of January is going to be cooler than the first half of January. Not going to be particularly notably cold, I wouldn't have thought, but it will be cooler in the second half of January compared to the first half, and I think any chance of beating 1916 has gone. Given the cool-off that we're coming, we would have to be appreciably higher than this to still remain above, at or above 7.5. So I think we're going to come in, well, it's difficult to say where we're going to come in actually, but I think we'll probably come in under 7 degrees. It's not totally impossible, it might actually come in under 6 degrees. Depends how many frosty nights we get, but I would anticipate we're going to finish up somewhere sort of low to mid 60s. So it will low to mid 60s. So it will be a very mild January. It'll probably be our mildest January since 2007 or 2008. But I don't think we're going to beat 1916. I think the chances of doing that have pretty much gone. And this is the reason why. These are the GFS and ECMWF 500 millibar high anomaly flowcharts from the Penn State University for the next 7 to 10 days. We've got the ECMWF on the top, and the GFS, which we'll have in a moment, is on the bottom. So 500 millibars is an area in the absolute high pressure and low pressure being moved around by the jet stream. Red extrapolates high pressure, blue to low pressure. Now you can see what's happening here with the ECM in the 7 to 10 day time frame, and we've got a large ridge of high pressure dominating. But unlike the situation through most of this winter, where the high pressure has been to our south, centred over France, Spain, and Portugal, and back into the Atlantic, now the high pressure is a bit further north, centred over the top of the UK and back into the Atlantic. It's still zonal, it's still all westerly, low pressure's to our north with the blue colours there. We're still bringing in the jet stream like that a little bit to our north, so we are actually technically on the mild side of the jet stream. The only difference is that we're under a ridge of high pressure, and because that high pressure is quite centrally located over the country, that means we're going to cool things down under that ridge, and that will be particularly notable at night, with the chance of some frosty nights coming along over the weekend and into the early part of next week. The second half of next week may start to get milder again, but I think there's going to be enough frosty nights over the weekend into early next week to take away that chance of beating the 1916 January CT. The GFS is very similar, but it does take that high pressure a bit further away from us into the North Atlantic, and it has this trough of low pressure actually sinking down through northern parts of Europe. Now, there's a lot of cold airing with that trough of low pressure, so we're just on the periphery of that, doing something like this with the flow and with the jet stream. Winter is biting there across much of northern, central and eastern Europe, where it has been so very, very mild through this winter so far. That is winter really biting across the north and the east, and even in some central parts of Europe in the 7 to 10 day time frame. As I say, we're just on the periphery of that, and this ridge is keeping that coldest of the air at bay. Nevertheless, it's rather cool, and again, that takes away the possibility, I think, of beating January 1916. It's not totally impossible if we just back that high pressure a little bit further westwards. If we were to just take that high pressure a little bit further westwards, it's not impossible that this trough of low pressure that's sinking down through the north and central parts of Europe could back a bit further west, and then that will place us in a direct northerly. And that will be by far the coldest outbreak that we've had this winter, given we haven't really had any cold outbreaks this winter. So there is a chance as we come up towards the end of the month, as I say, these are a 7 to 10 day time frame, 500 millibar high anomaly. It takes us to the 26th of January. It's not impossible as we come to the final days of January, we might get a cold northerly snap. I think it's probably going to be mostly restricted to northern parts of Europe, but it's not absolutely impossible that we might turn things quite a lot colder for a little while anyway. I doubt it will be sustained, I doubt it will last. We'll back wind into west quite quickly, I would have thought, but it's not impossible that for 2 or 3 days, sometime in the last week of January, we might get quite a potent cold snap. We shall have to see about that. These are the GFS upper air temperature and precipitation ensembles for the next couple of weeks. We're looking at Nottingham today. So red line is a 30-year upper air temperature average for Nottingham. The first thing that's very apparent with this is how much drier things are becoming. More about that in a moment. But what we can say is that at the moment we're still relatively mild with the upper air temperatures. There's another area of low pressure to sweep through today, bringing more rain and strong winds and mild temperatures. Once that gets out of the way, then the temperature falls. The upper air temperatures falls for the end of the week and into weekend. So it becomes colder, and this is where our frosty nights begin to reappear as we build in the area of high pressure. Through the early middle part of next week, the upper air temperatures lift up, but of course that's under high pressure, so just because the upper air temperatures are lifting up doesn't necessarily mean the surface temperatures will lift up. So early next week we probably have a continuation of frost. Around the middle of next week, I imagine does get milder. And then to the final week of January, that's this period just here, we do see a lot of scatter. Overall, a bit of a cooling trend, though, you have to say. And there are a few of these ensemble members that are really quite cold. These ones down here are going for a cold outbreak during the last week of January. That does include the GFS control run. That run is ran at a higher resolution compared to all other ensemble members except for the operational run. The operational run is this thick green line just here. That one is broadly in the middle of the pack today. We'll have a look at that control GFS run and see how it's producing that cold snap in a moment. But you see, there is definitely the possibility, no more than that, it's definitely the possibility, but we might get some significantly colder weather in the last week of January. And by that, I'm talking about cold enough for snow, as winds would swing probably into the north. It's a possibility, but it's probably not going to come off. But there's the chance that that trough over Scandinavia, Northern Europe could back far enough west to pull us into northerly winds for a while anyway, during the last week of January. Tentatively, though, we can't completely discount these much milder ensemble members up here. Those ones are keeping things much milder through the last week of January. What is notable, as I said, is the drying trend. So more rain to come today. Once that's out of the way, though, could be some showers tomorrow. Once today and tomorrow out of the way, we're definitely into then probably around a week of much drier weather. In fact, it could be completely dry for large parts of England and Wales, right way up to around the 23rd, 24th of January. Beyond that, precipitation spikes are coming back. Not significantly so, though. So even into the last week of January, maybe a little bit more unsettled, but nowhere near as wet as we've had through the first half of this winter. It could be that this winter is going to be a winter of two halves from a rainfall perspective, with a very wet first half and quite a lot drier in the second half. We'll have to wait and see about that. But February does tend to be drier than December and January, so we'll see where that goes. But definitely, we can say that once today and tomorrow out of the way, we are into much drier conditions for quite a while, probably. Temperature anomalies from the 16th to 24th of January, close to or a little bit above average. Precipitation anomalies from the 16th to 24th of January, drier than average, so that just confirms what I was talking about. We are going into a much drier spell of weather. Right, so this is the GFS operational run. High pressure building in for the weekend. That's going to settle things down. Will be quite cold under that ridge. Expect the first widespread frost probably since the first week of December. I mean, we've have had an exceptionally mild run of weather through the first half of this winter. There were a few colder days very early on in December. They didn't last very long. But I reckon this will be the first widespread frost over the weekend that we've had since early December. That high pressure sticks around into Monday. Now, for Scotland, it will turn a bit milder early next week. For the rest of us, under this ridge of high pressure, I think frost will continue. Freezing fog might become increasingly widespread as well. That's Tuesday, again, looking mostly dry but cold. Wednesday, the high pressure begins to pull away from us into the west, but probably still exerting enough influence to keep England and Wales quite cold. Scotland going back into westerly winds, so relatively mild there. The high pressure is still there in a week's time, actually, so let's just refresh that. So the high pressure in a week's time is starting to pull away from us. So by then we're starting to introduce or reintroduce a bit of a milder west-northwesterly. This is Thursday, 23rd of January, so a week's time. Just rather milder, beginning to come in around the top of the high pressure. So by the second half of next week, temperatures begin to lift up. That's Friday, looking milder. You can see that winds are coming around the top of the high pressure into the UK from the Atlantic. Probably a lot of cloud coming around top of that high pressure. Notice all of this blue and purple up over Scandinavia. That's very low pressure. And with that low pressure, with that trough, cold air is sinking in to Northern Europe as well. I say this ridge is just keeping us on the periphery of that cold air. Moving up towards day 10, that's how we're looking. So high pressure remains routed just out to our west and southwest. A very cold trough of low pressure is sinking through Scandinavia, much of Northern Europe. We're cool. We've got the winds in from the northwest, so it's not particularly mild at this point. The air is coming from like the south of Greenland, I suppose. So it's rather on the cool side, but the coldest air being kept at bay to our northeast. We're very close to pulling down a northerly wind, I have to say here. That's how we look a little bit beyond daytime, which is Monday the 27th of January. Again, closest ridge of high pressure, northern, eastern, central Europe looking very cold. There's the upper air temperatures showing that by far the coldest plunge of the winter is taking place across much of northern Europe. Bitterly cold there. The Scandinavia, Western Russia, Baltic regions, down into Central Europe. Poland is in the freezer there. So, as I say, this is by far the coldest. This would be by far the coldest weather that we've had so far this winter. You notice how we're being kept at bay. It's not particularly mild, but it's not overly cold. The coldest of the air just being kept at bay to our north and east by the position of this ridge of high pressure. Then the high pressure begins to centre itself over the country as we move into the very extended range. And that starts to pull in sort of a south-southeasterly wind off a frozen continent. So although we don't get those bitterly cold upper air temperatures and northerly winds, and the trough of low pressure bringing a risk of snow, it does turn increasingly cold through the closing days of January as the wind pulls in off the frozen continent. That's how the upper air temperatures look, actually quite mild. Notice much of northern and eastern Europe into the freezer. But if you look at the surface dew points, we can see that actually we are dragging in very cold surface continental air with that area of high pressure. So, I mean, if that comes off, forget any possibility of beating January 1916 with the CT. That's off the table totally if we start to pull in these cold surface temperatures off the continent. That's a classic inversion, by the way, where it's milder aloft, but much colder down on the surface. We finish up with this GFS run, having high pressure, a wall of high pressure really sitting to our east. Low pressure is out to the west. It looks like that ridge is trying to inch itself up towards Scandinavia. Where it will be successful in forming a Scandinavian high, who knows? But that's certainly the direction that's going in there as we get to the very end of this GFS run, which is Saturday, the 1st of February. This is that control GFS run. We know this is going to be colder from what I just saw on the ensembles. So again, the high pressure is ridging in across the country over the weekend, bringing dry weather and potentially some frosty nights. That's hanging around through the first half of next week as well. Plenty of cold nights to come early next week. The high then begins to pull away from us into the Atlantic through the middle of next week. Second half of next week, this is Thursday, a week's time, we begin to bring in a milder northwesterly around the top of the ridge. But the high carries on pulling out into the Atlantic. And so the difference between this control GFS run and the operational GFS is that the winds are actually starting to turn into the north, and so by the time you get through to Saturday the 25th of January, the GFS control run is actually turning the wind into the north and bringing down a proper cold northerly. That's what I was talking about in terms of if we inch that high pressure far enough to the west, then we will open the door to this cold air that is plunging southwards across Scandinavia and much of northern Europe. That's how we look at day 10 with the GFS control run. Winds have properly turned into the north, and it has turned much cold. Look at the upper air temperatures, actually the minus 10 Celsius isotherm, sinking southwards across the country. That's bitterly cold air. Would certainly be cold enough to bring snow showers. By far the coldest spell of the winter so far. And those cold northerly winds are maintained to Monday the 27th of January. Again, look at the upper air temperatures. They look very, very cold indeed. Then the high pressure begins to sink down over the top of the country. Keeps us very cold and frosty, I would have thought, under that area of high pressure. But we cut off the northerly. That's pushed away from us to the east. But this is quite a cold final week to January. First of all, from the northerly, and there is a risk of snow with that northerly as well. And then from sort of high pressure dominated, very frosty conditions through the closing days of January. So that's how we could get a cold snap through the last week of January. Whether we will or not, whether we will be able to take that high pressure far enough to the west and pull down those northerly winds, I think there's a lot of uncertainty about that. But that's how we could arrive at a cold snap with bitterly cold northerly winds in the last week of January. Probably not lasting more than 2 or 3 days, though. And then we've got the GEM. So again, this one has high pressure building in over the weekend, settling things down, turning us much drier, but also quite cold. That high pressure sticks around into the early part of next week. Plenty of night frost to come, particularly for England and Wales. Middle of next week, we start to pull that high pressure out into the North Atlantic. We begin to set up quite a cool northwesterly here. High pressure is going quite a long way away from us into the North Atlantic, into the second half of next week, and we are very close to pulling down a cold northerly wind. That's how we look at day 10. High pressure is just not going far enough north into the North Atlantic to pull down a direct northerly, but we are very, very close there to having a northerly plunge by day 10 with the GEM. That's how the upper air temperatures look. So yes, definitely looking quite cool. For the north, quite cold. If the high pressure was to go any further northwest, we would open the door to those northerly winds. And then the ECM looks like that. So high pressure building in over the weekend, keeping us mostly dry. Overnight frost is likely through the weekend and into the early part of next week as well. That's how we're looking at the end of next week, so not taking that high pressure as far into the Atlantic for the second half of next week. That means that really we just have milder westerly winds and a lot of cloud coming in over top of the high through the second half of next week after a cold start to the week. This looks like it's setting up a northerly, doesn't it? It looks like this high pressure up here over eastern Canada is going to pull up this high pressure in the Atlantic just to our west-southwest, with the trough of low pressure just there, shifting into Scandinavia and the winds turning into the north. That's how it looks like it's setting up there on Saturday the 25th of January. But actually at day 10 we don't really pull it off. This is Sunday the 26th. Again, you could envisage that if we could roll on another 24 hours, that will probably evolve into a northerly, with this area of low pressure to the south of Greenland sort of doing something like that and allowing the wind to turn into the north. But up to day 10, the ECM keeps things relatively westerly and quite mild. But again, it's not that far away from turning a lot colder during the closing days of January with northerly winds. So this period is going to need watching because there could be quite a potent cold snap coming. Certainly for Northern Europe, I think we can say that with better confidence than for the UK and for Ireland. We're a little bit too close to this ridge to allow those winds to get into the north, but it is a close run thing. These are the ECM ensembles from the Icelandic Met Office. So these are the options I've got on the table within the ECM ensembles today for day 10, which is the 26th of January. We have 18 members of the ECM ensembles that have this cold trough of low pressure sinking in across Northern Europe. The high pressure is pulling out into the middle of the Atlantic. So this scenario is actually allowing cold winds to come in from the north to northwest into the UK, and for Northern Europe it's turning a lot colder. That includes the ECM control run, by the way. 13 members of the ECM ensembles, including the operational run, that's a run we've just been talking about, and milder. They have the ridge of high pressure here just to our south, and also a ridge out to the west, which keeps this trough of low pressure, instead of sinking over into the east as it keeps a trough of low pressure generally to our north at day 10, that keeps the wind in from the west. 8 members of the ECM ensembles at day 10 have this trough of low pressure over the top of the country. So that looks like quite a cooled, cold and unsettled scenario. 7 at day 10 have low pressure just to our north-northeast. High pressure is out to our west-northwest. That's kind of like bringing in a northwesterly. And then 5 hints at a bit of a mid-Atlantic ridge with low pressure, trough of low pressure sinking through Northern Europe into Central Europe. Quite cold winds in from the north. So the ECM ensemble is possibly favouring a cold snap, actually, through that final week of January. Probably only a cold snap though, because in 2 weeks' time, this is the single option that we have. It's the 31st of January, last day of the month. And at this point, it's gone milder. Low pressure's back up to the north, high pressure's to the south. So any cold snap only lasts a few days, and then the winds are back in from the west. This last week of January, though, could provide the first proper sort of cold temperature. I mean, we're going to have night frost over weekend into early next week, but the last week of January might provide the first proper cold snap of the winter. We shall have to wait and see. It is on a knife edge. It's by no means guaranteed. Finally, the Beijing Climate Centre, so these are 500 millibar heights broken down to 10-day periods. The first 10-day period takes us from the 16th to 25th of January, becoming 10 days with above average heights to our south, below average heights to the north. Looking more settled than it has been, and relatively mild as well. The next 10-day period looks like that. So yeah, that's right, 26th January to the 4th of February. We're back into westerlies, so unsettled here and relatively mild. Remember, this is a 10-day anomaly though, so it doesn't rule out the chance that within a couple of days within that 10-day period, you might get a cold snap. That doesn't rule out the chance of winds getting into the north and bringing us cold snap at some point through the 10 days overall. However, as a 10-day anomaly, that's unsettled and relatively mild. This goes on for the next 10-day period, which is the 5th of February to the 14th. Low pressure again dominates from the Atlantic, so that looks mild and unsettled. And then finally, the last 10-day period is the 15th to the 24th of February, with low pressure out to the northwest, high pressure strengthening to our south, looking a little bit drier for some parts of the country, and still mild winds coming in from the west or the southwest. So it's quite interesting what's going on here. It's been a very extended video, so that makes up for yesterday's curtailed video. It's quite interesting what's going on. Definitely we're going to have a spell of colder, drier, frostier weather over weekend into early next week. Middle to second half of next week probably turns milder. And then the question will be, do we pull off a cold snap in the last week of the month? That, of course, is to be determined. Right, tomorrow I've got JMA Friday, which is your month-end look ahead, and we'll have a week to 10-day video update too. That's all for now, though, and thanks for watching.